important event in the life of Christ, in the life of Jesus our Lord. There are two Lazarus in the Bible. This Lazarus, the brother of Martha and Mary, and the Lazarus who was a poor man who laid at the table of the rich man, begging crumbs from his table. And today I want us to focus on this Lazarus. The reason we call this Lessons from Lazarus. Jesus was out near the Jordan River where John the Baptist was baptizing. And he and his disciples were there when the word came to him that Lazarus was sick. The sisters had sent someone to get Jesus to come to the house. They lived in Bethany, about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. It's a place where Jesus and the disciples very often found refuge. The thing that we've got to remember about Jesus is that he was covered with multitudes of people constantly in his ministry. We know what it is to go to a quiet place and relax sometimes. We know what it is when we have to be alone and can go off into a closet, so to speak, and be alone. But Jesus didn't have that privilege. He didn't have that because the crowds in that day were just crowding all around him and thronging him. But there are times when he would go to Bethany to be in the house of Lazarus and Mary and Martha, where he could find refuge, where he could find a quiet place, where he could find a time to relax. And the Bible says Jesus loved Lazarus and he loved Mary and Martha. Does that mean he loved others less? No, but he loved them in a way, not necessarily the agape love, but the phileo love, that he loved them. And so when the word came that Lazarus was sick, he knew, because he was the Son of God, he knew that it was a sickness unto his death, but not totally his death. We'll talk more about that as we go through the lesson. The word came to Jesus that Lazarus was sick, and the sisters expected Jesus to come right away. And we find that Jesus didn't come right away. Jesus arrives late. In fact, he waited 2 days where he was there along the Jordan River before heading to Bethany. The disciples probably were wondering, what's going on? Most of them didn't want him to even go. For he was going to have to go back into Judea, and he's going to have to go very close to Jerusalem, where the scribes and the Pharisees and the chief priests and all those wanted to kill him. And in fact, the disciples said, Jesus, let's don't go. You know they're trying to kill you. But Jesus overcame that admonition from them and started back to Bethany. Now, I like Thomas. I should. That's my name. But I like Thomas. And I don't know whether arrogantly or whether just truthfully, he says, well, let's go with him and die with him also. Brethren and friends, we need that kind of attitude today. Not grudgingly, but need to know we need to go with Jesus also. They thought he was 2 days late. They thought he was 4 days late. But Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. Jesus knew exactly what he had to do. And Jesus was not amiss in waiting. As he started, Thomas said, well, come on, boys, we'll just go with Jesus. How many times this week have we gone with Jesus? How many times this week have we needed that refuge? How many times this week Have we thought about looking into the Word, finding the comfort and the joy and the peace that we need, finding what is there for us just to go with Jesus? And as they were walking along, heading down the journey to go back to Bethany, they were still talking and still questioning him. And you know what he said? It makes sense to us, but probably didn't make sense to them. And in a day, there's 12 hours, and if you walk in the darkness, you don't know where you're going, you're going to stumble and fall. If you walk in the light, you know where you're going. Jesus said, I am the light, I am the way. And here's the light. Did we walk with Jesus? Did we go with Jesus? Did we walk in the light? Did we pick it up? Did we read it? Or did we just get it this morning and bring it to the assembly together? When Jesus got to Bethany, he was too late. Too late for Mary and Martha. Too late for those Jews who had come from Jerusalem or come from the village there in Bethany to sorrow with her at the loss of their brothers. But Jesus, as we know from the rest of the story, Jesus was right on time. Right on time. Martha met him out on the road and said, Lord, if you'd have been here, our brother wouldn't have died. Those of us who've lost loved ones, those of us who've lost spouses, those of us who've lost fathers and mothers, those of us who've lost someone in our life know how she felt. There's an empty spot there. There's sorrow there. There's things in her life that she kept remembering about Lazarus. And the one that she wanted to heal him of the sickness that he had was late in her mind. And Jesus said, if you believe. And she said, Lord, I believe. I believe you're the Messiah, the Son of God, the confession that we've all made and who are Christians in this assembly this morning. But that was not what Jesus wanted her to understand. He told the disciples on his way that Lazarus was asleep. The disciples said, well, if he's asleep, he's going to be all right. He's going to wake up. And Jesus had to tell them, Lazarus is dead. Lazarus is dead. Martha gets Mary, and Mary comes out from where she'd been mourning, and she meets Jesus, and she says almost the exactly same thing as Martha. She said, Lord, if you'd have been here, our brother wouldn't have died. And it's not sarcastically, but it was in sorrow. Tell me something in your heart. Tell God something in your heart this morning, because you see, the only one that can read our hearts is God. The only one that can read our hearts is Jesus. Do we expect Jesus and God to do things in our lives, and then when it doesn't happen the way we want it to happen? Too often in our lives, we're short-sighted. Mary and Martha, they wanted Jesus there to heal Lazarus so that he didn't die, because they didn't want him to die. They wanted him to be with them. They wanted to continue to love him and him love them and be together. But now he's dead. It's over. Are we not like that sometimes? You don't get here and you don't do things that I ask you just as quick as soon as I want them done, or we want them done, and therefore we forget the power, the strength, and the mightiness of God in Jesus. Of course, we know what's going to happen. They didn't. And not only were they sorrow at the death and the loss of their brother, but there was sorrow that Jesus came in late and couldn't do what they wanted him to do. We're studying on Wednesday nights in Ron's class about God, and it's difficult for those of us who are created to study about the Creator. He is so much above us. He is so mightier than we. He has so much more power than we give him credit for that we don't understand sometimes. Yeah. We limit the power of God in our lives too often because we won't allow him to do what he wants to do. You see, he's not going to take us over. He's not going to take away our free will. He's not going to do for us what he wants to do for us when we don't really want him to do it or understand why it's being done. So, don't understand? Yeah, most often we don't understand. But you know, the instructions are right here. The instructions are right here. Does he come late in your life? Does he come late in my life? Does he not do exactly what I want him to do, what you want him to do when we ask him to do something for us? Do we walk about day by day? There's a certain pattern that we have. We get up in the mornings, we dress, we get ready, we go to work, we spend however many hours at work, we come home, we have supper, we watch a little TV, and we go to bed, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day are the same thing, and God and Jesus is never there. Till finally we need him. We got to have him. Many of us here this morning have heavy hearts about something. I don't know who's sitting next to you, who's sitting behind you, who's sitting in front of you. They don't know either. But you know, God does. God knows what's on your heart and why it's so heavy. But do we limit the power of God to take that weight off? Have we ever sat in the conference room of the doctor's office or a hospital and heard the doctor come in and say, "I'm sorry, but all the tests say you've got cancer"? The big C scares us half to death. They did a body scan on Mother many years ago, and it showed up little red spots in the joint. I think the doctor said they were probably arthritis, but he said it could be cancer. And he asked the question, "Should I tell your mother?" And I said, "Oh no, don't tell Mother, kill her." Well, that's one word she feared more than anything else in the world. I don't want to hear about cancer, Tommy. If doctor ever says I've got it, don't tell me. I said, "Well, you're going to die from it." "Well, let me die from it. I don't know what it was." A lot of us are like that. Or maybe you're like I am, and the doctor comes in after this test and that test and the other test, and he says, "Tommy, your heart is not beating correctly." What are we going to do? What's going to happen? You know, if your heart stops, most of the time, all of the time, we die. Well, here I are. They know what to do. They know how to do it. But it still puts burden on us and a burden on us. Or maybe they come in and they say, a loved one you've got's got cancer or got heart problems or got some other problem that's going to lead them to death. And we have that burden. And then we turn to God. And then we turn to Jesus. And then we say, "Lord, I need you. I haven't needed you for 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months or 2 years, but I need you now." I have a sister, most of you know her, Barbara, who's in a facility in Pennsylvania. She's 5 years younger than I am. She doesn't know who she is or where she is, or at least if she does, she cannot communicate it. The strokes in her life have taken that away to communicate. To say, "Oh, that's Tommy. I'm glad you come to see me." Or, "That's Dick. I've been married to him for 40 years. I love him." She can't communicate that. And I pray. But what I pray may not be what God needs for her in her life. And I don't see the future for what God has for Barbara and for Dick. But I don't want to limit his power. I don't want to say, if you'd have been here, Lord, my brother wouldn't have died. If you'd have been here, Lord, because they had no idea what was about to happen. No idea at all. Jesus, on this occasion, as I see him in my spiritual mind, Jesus gets Mary in one arm and Martha in the other arm. And then he says, where have you laid him? In those days, those that they buried didn't necessarily do it in the ground in a grave, but in a tomb or a cave nearby. As they start toward the cave, start toward the tomb, start toward the place that Lazarus has been laid, those that are there that are mourning say, oh, how he loved him. They thought, wrongly so, that he wanted to go view the body. They thought for one more time Jesus wanted to see Lazarus, the one whom he loved. But they didn't know what was about to happen. Even the girls said, oh, but Lord, he's been dead 4 days, he stinketh. Toxicologists tell us that as the human body begins to decay from death, the temple that we live in now, the tabernacle that we're in, once our spirit leaves us and it's clinically and it's dead, it begins to decay, go back to the dust, as Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, go back to the dust from which it came. They didn't have the techniques that the Egyptians have to embalm the body. So they would take a body and they would sort of clean it up real good and put herbs and senses, pretty spices and different things on it to make it smell good, wrap it up in those burial clothes, and then put it in a tomb. And the girls were worried that Lazarus had begun to decay. There was a superstition of the Jews that the soul or the spirit would hang around the body for about 3 days or so in case something happened that the soul could go back into the body. I don't know where that came from. I can't find it in the Old Testament anywhere. But that's what they thought. So why did Jesus wait till 4 days? He wanted to be sure that they understood, if that was the case, which it wasn't, that the spirit had gone. Lazarus was really dead. How's your life this morning? Is your life about dead, or is it there's just no hope and there's no joy, there's no peace, there's no happiness in it anymore? You dread tomorrow. You dread Tuesday. You just dread it all because it's just, what about your marriage? Is your marriage what it ought to be? Oh, our marriages are not perfect. I know that. I married a perfect woman, but she didn't marry a perfect man. You can smile at that one if you will. Is your marriage dead? Does it need help? Does it need strength? Does it need boosting up? You know who can do that? Oh, marriage counselor? No, not the marriage counselor we need. You need, if your marriage is about dead, is Jesus. How's your health? Oh, it's about gone. I just don't know where I can find the strength to go on. Where are you going to find it? In Jesus. What about your job? Oh man, you don't know the boss that I've got. Man, if you had the boss that I have, you wouldn't want to go to work either. What about Jesus? What about your church? What about your Christian life? What about the good deeds that God wants you to do and others to see round about you at school or at work or play or recreation or wherever. Oh, it's not there. Jesus can raise these dead things that we have in our heart to life. Why do you say that? He's going to raise Lazarus. You're kidding. If you'd have told that to the people there in Bethany and at that tomb that day, it scared them half to death. But you know He can do that. He can do that. He can do it today. We sometimes in our lives, we get all this fixation in our mind is how little can we do to get away with whatever it is we want to get away with or get done with. The boss comes in and says, I've got a job for you to do. I want you to do blah, 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 blah. And we begin to think, how little can I do to do what, boy, I can't even talk, to do what the boss wants me to do. Or the professor or the teacher said, now next week we got a book report. No, we got 2 book reports. Maybe we got 3. Well, how in the world am I going to get, how little can I do? How little can I read to make this book report? Or maybe our lives are just, we think, how little can I do to, I'm as bad as anybody here. I bet I keep 9 doctors in business in this city. And every one of them gives me a handful of medicine, and I always wonder how little of this medicine can I take? And that's what every one gives me. How little can I get away? How many services at church must I attend? You hear that? How many services must I attend? Well, what's wrong with that? You don't must have to do anything. I don't either. Where Jesus said, I want you all. I gave you my all. I want your all. But I'm a little busy now, Lord. I want to give you just enough to get by till down the road. You know, I've been there. I've said that. I've done that. We all have, haven't we? Jesus steps to the tomb, tells the men to roll the stone away. He who had all power in heaven and earth, he who was the Son of God, he who was the Messiah. Could you not think that with a flip of his finger, a blink of his eye, he could roll that stone away? Well, sure he could. The emphasis of what he's about to do is not rolling the stone away, but who was in the tomb. Lazarus, who was dead, or me, who was dead, or you, who was dead. Those in the tomb was where the emphasis was supposed to be and still is today. We often think that it's all a collective thing, and there's a lot of it in the church that is a collective thing. But you know, most of what we deal with every day is on an individual basis. I'm not going to stand before the king in the day of judgment and say, but Ron did this and Ron did that and the church did this and the church did that and I'm all right, ain't I? No, that's not the way it's going to be. I'm going to have to give an answer for what Tommy did, not for what you did. And you're not going to give an answer for what I did or for what I said. You're going to have to give an answer for yourself. When the teacher calls for the book report, do you go with 1 or do you go with 3? When the boss says, have you finished my project? Well, I got No, you want to have it all done. Well, friends, the most important thing in the end of our lives is eternal life in heaven with God, and we want it all to be done. I don't want to stand there and him say, "Depart from me, you workers of iniquity." Well, you see, I never knew you. But I thought I was getting away with what I could get away with. No, I never knew you. We talked about it in our class this morning about what is the one thing we fear more than anything else in this world, and that's death. And we're all going to have this appointment. We're all going to die. One and I seen every time we get a paper, which is not often, but every time we get a paper and look at the obituary, there's somebody in there we know. And like every week or every other week, we wind up at the funeral home visiting with a family that's lost a loved one whom we knew. We're all going to die. And we can't change that. And we fear death because we don't know what the movement from here to there is going to be like and what the there is going to be. But yet the Bible tells us, I am the light, I am the truth, I am the way. And Jesus said that, and we know who's going to be in death. Jesus. Don't you want to know him today? I want to know him today and take his hand when I cross over there. Well, you see, he's been over there and he's conquered it over there. I am the way and the truth and the light. It's not dark over there, for he's the light. I don't want to miss it. And we're all bound up in things of the day. And so Jesus said, "Lazarus, come forth." I said that to Wilford the other day, and he says, "You know why he said come forth?" I called Lazarus. I said, why? Because if he said he'd just come forth, all the graves would have opened up and everybody was dead. And that's right. He has that power, John chapter 5. He specifically called Lazarus back from the dead. And if he has that power, don't you know? Don't you know he has the power to do whatever it is that we need him to do in our lives today? Sure. But how are we going to do it? If we allow it. Or we can go on about our lives the way we've gone on them for years and years and years. But until we get out of ourselves and let Jesus in, he can't help us. Just before he raised Lazarus from the dead, Jesus wept. 2 little words in one little verse. It shows us that Jesus was touched by the sorrow in the hearts of Mary and Martha. And when we have sorrow, whether it be for the loss of a loved one, whether it be for some other hurt, for some sickness or something in our life, he hurts for us the same way. And Jesus still today, 2,000 years later, he still weeps for us when we don't allow